Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Now that wheat is starting to slow down for the winter, we want to take some time to talk about potential wheat diseases before they possibly show up in your field. Joining us now is Bob Hunger, our extension wheat pathologist. And Bob, you and the team are actually studying wheat rust and other diseases here in the greenhouse.
Yes, Lyndall. Of course, we have a lot of field experiments going on, but especially through the winter, we start working more on screening all of the breeding lines in the wheat breeding program for reaction to different diseases.
Now, this tray here has wheat rust. Tell me how it's set up and what specifically you're looking at.
Okay, well, going on right now in the greenhouse, we're screening upwards of around 500 different wheat lines in the wheat breeding program for reaction to leaf rust at the seedling stage. So these plants here and the ones behind me have been inoculated with spores of the leaf rust fungus, and then my technician Brian Olson over the next week or two will be rating these for reaction resistant or susceptible to help the breeder determine which lines are resistant and which are susceptible to leaf rust.
What exactly is leaf rust? How do you define it?
Well, leaf rust is a fungus that appears mostly in the spring in Oklahoma. On this seedling here, on these leaves, you can see the rust pustules. The spores of the fungus are being produced in those pustules, and it slowly drains the food and resources from the plant, so those can't go into supplying the necessary nutrition to fill the grain. This line on the other side, or on the other hand, is showing very little pustule formation, and in a few places, such as on this leaf, you can see that there's just flecking on the leaf. There's no spore production, so this would be a resistant line. All of these 500 lines will be scored then for resistance or susceptibility to this disease.
Will these potentially be varieties down the road?
They sure could. Of course, there's a lot of other diseases to screen for, and there's a lot of other agronomic traits, yield, height, maturity, all of those kinds of things will be looked at over the course that they're in the program. And then the wheat breeder, Brett Carver, will make those decisions as to which lines to advance and which will become candidate cultivars and then eventually a cultivar.
In terms of the rust, are you seeing anything in Oklahoma fields right now?
We have had a few reports of leaf rust in the field over the last couple months, which is not uncommon. We typically do get some leaf rust in the fall. Growers should look for that a little bit and see if they do have leaf rust in the fall, but not be overly concerned about it, because typically our winters are strong enough, cold enough that those leaves will die out, and then they have to be more observant of it come the spring.
For those who are potentially seeing some of this now, are there any treatment options this time of year?
Well, there are fungicides that could be applied to control it, but for the most part, the fall infections are not significantly severe that it would merit a spraying of a fungicide. That would be better left to be done in the spring when the wheat is, after the wheat has come out of dormancy and has started to joint.
And in terms of scouting, when is the best time to scout and how should I do it?
Well, they should be aware of any diseases that are occurring in their field. They would have to look at the lower leaves for the rust pustules and then just know that they are there. But then in the spring, just keep an eye on the pustules and see if they're moving up the canopy, and also keep their ears open for what is occurring south of us in Texas, because in the spring the inoculum blows from the southern part of Oklahoma and Texas and is deposited here with rainy weather, and that's where our real severe infections typically come from, and that's when spraying would need to be done.
So early scouting and awareness of what's going on in Texas.
Yep, that's good. Good plan.
Okay, Bob Hunger, our Extension Wheat Pathologist, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And for more information on identifying diseases in your wheat, just go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Every year in November or December, I've tried to remind cow-calf producers that are going to use wheat pasture for their mature cows during the winter and the springtime that they need to start now to provide a mineral supplement to prevent a possible problem called grass tetany. Grass tetany is basically another name for a deficiency of the mineral magnesium as well as calcium, which can occur in very, very rapidly growing, lush wheat pasture, generally in the months of February, March, and maybe even April. Grass tetany is something that's most likely to occur to older cows right after they calve. And the reason it happens in older cows is because as they age, just like in humans, the skeleton is less capable of releasing and mobilizing minerals to go into the bloodstream to make up for the difference in the diet. Therefore, if you're going to put some older cows out on wheat pasture to calve in January, February, March, start right now and provide a mineral mix to help prevent grass tetany. And I would shop for a mineral mix that has 12 to 15% magnesium in it. That ought to be adequate to really go a long ways to help prevent this particular malady. I would suggest that we go ahead and start the mineral feeding now because we want those cows to be used to the mineral and consuming at least about 3 to 4 ounces per head per day in order to get an adequate amount of both calcium and magnesium in their diets. So if we would just go ahead and plan now, provide the mineral mix that they're going to need next spring right after they calve, we can really help ourselves and reduce the risk of grass tetany. And we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
We're here at the Food and Ag Products Center with Evan Fraser, who is a food security researcher at the University of Guelph in Canada. And Evan, you study the topic feeding 9 billion people by the year 2050, which is something we hear a lot about. Give us your opinion of what the situation is.
So it's a big challenge. Over the next 30 or 40 years, the world's population is going to go up from about 7 billion to about 9.5 billion people. And the scientists that study this figure that to meet the demand that this creates, farmers of this world are going to have to produce about 70% more food. And if they fail in this task, the world will become hungrier, more violent, and more disease prone. And so this represents sort of a grand challenge that faces humanity over the next generation.
What do you think are some of the reasons that caused this sort of situation that we're in? It's not one single thing.
No, you're absolutely right. So we've got, on one hand, we've just got pure population growth. We are producing more people every day. At the same time, that demand, or that population growth, is accentuated by the fact that people are moving to cities. And as people move to cities, they tend to eat more demanding diets. At the same time as that is happening, things that are forcing demand up, things like bad weather, climate change, and high energy prices threaten to make food harder and more expensive to produce. So some people talk about between the force of rising demand and hits to the supply, we face what's called a perfect storm of problems about food security.
And it's kind of a lot to wrap your head around. I mean, it's pretty multifaceted and at times controversial, right?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, on one side of the coin, we've got people who very adamantly believe that the solution to this problem is to buy local organic food that's produced on small-scale farms within the urban hinterland. On the other side of the coin, we've got the proponents of genetic modification and GMO technologies and biotech that say that the future of food security is big ag producing huge amounts of food in some bread baskets on the planet. I personally take a middle ground and say we can't have an either or, we have to have a little bit of both, because both kinds of systems represent really important things that we all need.
And as you mentioned, this is a complex issue, and no doubt there's not one solution. But what are some of the things that you propose to address this and be able to progress by 2050?
So, in my opinion, there's really 4 broad areas that we need to be investing in. First of all, we need to boost production to meet demand, but we need to do it in sustainable ways. So that means investing in things like precision agriculture, getting more crops per drop of irrigation, getting more crops per unit of fertilizer we apply. So sustainable intensification is the first thing. The second thing would be to distribute the food we've got better. Bottom line is, at the present day, there's enough food for everybody to eat a sustainable, healthy diet. But there's still a billion people that go to bed every night hungry. So we don't do a good enough job distributing it. So distributing food means reducing poverty in the developing world and storing food in famine-prone areas so that there's a buffer. So that's number 2, distributing food. The third thing is to essentially build the local food systems. We need to have more robust local food systems, not because local food's going to feed all of us all of the time, but again, local food acts like a buffer, as a line of defense between an urban consumer and the vagaries of an international market. And this is especially important in poorer parts of the world. So that's the third thing. We need to have better local food. And finally, in my opinion, we need to have better environmental better environmental regulation. Make sure that when we farm, communicate to farmers the incentives so that they can farm in a way that is optimally sustainable. So sustainable intensification, better regulation, better distribution, and more local food. Those are the 4 areas I think are really important.
And in your opinion, where do universities, in particular land-grant schools like Oklahoma State, come into that solution and some of these things that you suggest?
Well, education, obviously. We need to be educating another generation of young farmers who will be able to get into this industry and do all those things that I just said. So that's critical. Applied research, so that we know the kinds of regulatory tools and regulatory instruments we can use to help create the right incentives for farming. Developing the technologies of precision agriculture are absolutely critical, and that's at the cutting edge of some of the high-tech science. So those are all areas where I think that the land-grant institutions and the ag colleges in North America and Europe can really play an important role.
And then in terms of what can happen, what farmers and ranchers can do and help with the solutions?
Well, farmers and ranchers have to be able to farm in the most ecologically and economically efficient ways possible. So they have to interpret all these signals, these market signals, the changing weather conditions, and try to farm in a way that ensures for long-term farm stewardship, so soil conservation, animal welfare, so farming in as ethically and sustainable a way as possible, while ultimately trying to feed the world, because farmers feed cities, as the Ontario Wheat Board likes to tell me.
Definitely. Dr. Evan Fraser, thanks so much for your time. And for those of you who would like to learn more about Dr. Fraser and his team's research and their work, just go to the SUNUP website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. The days with little or no rain have been adding up. We had to go back to Mesonet's 30-day rainfall map to get to a map with some significant rainfall across a major part of the state. The rain on our 30-day rainfall map ending December 10th fell mainly in a wide band from southwest and central Oklahoma to the eastern border. The green areas had 1 or more inches of rain, the yellow 4 inches or more. Our last rain event was a drizzle and fog event. The 2 exceptions were the spots colored green in the Panhandle and in the far southeast. Most locations had less than a ½ inch. Locations in the light blue areas in the southwest had less than 1/10 of an inch. One saving grace has been the low winds. Wednesday afternoon at 4:50, only 2 Mesonet sites were at or above 10 miles per hour. Apache came in at 10 miles per hour and Ringling was at 11 miles per hour. Lower wind speeds and cooler temperatures have reduced moisture loss from soils, conserving what little rain we've had and contributing to our recent foggy days. Let's hope we see another round of good rainfall with our next rain event. Here's Gary with an update on our drought status.
Thanks, Al, and good morning, everybody.
Well, hopefully at this time we're getting ready for a really good rain this weekend because we really need it. Now, speaking of that, let's take a look at the latest U.S. Drought Monitor map and see where we're at. Well, unfortunately, still a little too much red and orange out there in western Oklahoma, and we've had a little bit of spread of the extreme drought. That's the red portion across northwestern Oklahoma up into Harper and Woods County. A little bit more down in southwestern Oklahoma too. So those areas that have continued to miss out on the best rainfall over the last 3 to 4 months, we're still seeing that drought intensify. And you know, when we look at southeastern Oklahoma, they've had some decent rains, but parts of that area have also moved into moderate drought. So drought is once again intensifying across Oklahoma. We definitely need some rainfall. Now, as we can see from the Mesonet rainfall maps dating back to August 1st, that almost all areas of the state have been dry. Now, parts of western Oklahoma have seen 5 inches of rain or less. And even parts of southeastern Oklahoma, where as much as 17 inches of rain has fallen, those areas are still running a deficit, at least since August 1st of this year. So when you look at the statistics since August 1st, the departure from normal rainfall, we've had a statewide average rainfall total of about 9.8 inches, and that's about 3.5 inches below normal, again, since August 1st. And that ranks as the 25th driest August 1st through December 10th on record since at least 1921. So you can definitely see the need for more rainfall. So once again, we're faced with the need for more rain at the driest time of the year. So whatever we get this weekend will definitely be a gift. One of these days we're going to look at that drought map and it's going to be all white and we're all going to be very pleased, but unfortunately not this week and probably not next week either. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Al and Gary and our friends at the Mesonet are celebrating a pretty big milestone this year. SUNUP's Dave Deacon explains.
Every day, or every month at least, is really a new story in the Mesonet. And whether it's a historic ice storm or a historic heat wave.
It is a great outdoor laboratory. Now, a lot of times we may not like some of the things that Mother Nature throws at us.
But the Oklahoma Mesonet has been there to record all of those events. The Mesonet is celebrating 20 years of operation. That's 20 years of over 1,000 atmospheric and subterranean observations sent back to the Norman office every 5 minutes from the 120 sites across Oklahoma.
When we started from zero. The concept was to build the network from scratch so there's consistency, so we don't have to worry about one set of sensors at one place and another set at another, so you don't have to worry if one's a little bit different than another.
We've actually evolved now with 20 years of data into the beginnings of a climate network, not just a weather network.
Our archive now exceeds 5 billion observations, and there's really nowhere else in the world with such a dense archive of weather data.
You can pick a day in our 20-year Mesonet history, pick a site, go back to that hour and tell somebody this is what we recorded at that time.
You might call the Oklahoma Mesonet a success story because of all the data that it has collected over the past 20 years. But none of that would have been possible if not for the successful partnership between Oklahoma's two largest research universities.
OU and OSU joined forces to develop the plan for the state's Mesonet.
We found out that we had some colleagues at the University of Oklahoma in the Norman weather community that also had ideas about a better and bigger network of weather stations in the state.
And in 1991, Governor Henry Bellman gave us our initial funding to put out our first 108 weather stations.
J.D. Carlson did eastern Oklahoma and I did western Oklahoma. And when we started out, we thought we were going to have trouble locating places to put all of these sites.
We primarily worked with OSU and the county educators across the state to look for good representative sites in each county.
There are people actually competing to get one of these sites on their land. We thought that they wouldn't want to give up a corner of their pasture and put this big 30-foot tower in there, but they were actually eager for it.
We had those deployed by January 1st, 1994, and our network was operational.
To be truly a statewide network, we felt that we had to be dispersed across the state
and get a good on-the-ground look at our weather as it happens. And we know we live in a state with very dynamic weather.
Just a fantastic data source that lets us do some things that our colleagues in other places are quite envious about.
And the best part is it's accessible to everyone the world over, with special focus on helping Oklahomans.
I think we had a part in helping connect rural Oklahoma into a lot of these, especially weather information, but in some ways, once they had the connection to weather information, it opened up a whole lot of other kinds of opportunities, especially with some of the rural schools.
We work with firefighters, fire managers, emergency managers, farmers, growers and producers in the K through 12 community across the state to use the data to make decisions for their local communities.
We're a very weather conscious state, so whether it comes to public safety or business and economic value, educational value, research, we see our data applied in just a wide variety of settings.
So it's kind of a one-stop shopping for Oklahoma weather.
We are here today at the historic Magruder wheat plots to talk with Kim Anderson, our Extension Crop Marketing Specialist. And Kim, the latest supply and demand numbers have been released. What's your take?
Well, there wasn't much change there. You look at wheat, you had minor changes on the ending stocks. They were very near the trade expectations, so nothing there. You look at corn and it was even less significant than wheat. It was slightly under 2 billion bushels for the ending stocks. The last month and the trade expectations was slightly above it. I think the soybean numbers are significant. They came in at 410 million bushels for ending stocks. The trade was expecting 431. Last month it was 445 million bushels. So a good drop there in soybean stocks, and world soybean ending stocks were lower. I think the hard red winter wheat, I think we got bad news there. They lowered the hard red winter wheat exports from 320 million bushels down to 305, and they raised the ending stocks from 200 to 227 million bushels. So I think some significant numbers with hard red winter corn, all wheat. The numbers don't matter in soybeans. I think they'll have a little impact there.
What is the market situation now in terms of prices?
Well, you know, you talk about wheat. We were wallowing around there from $5.80 to $6.20. We talked about that. It popped through $6.20. It went up above $6.60. We thought, well, maybe it'll go up to the next level above $6.20. Came back down to that $6.20 level. This next week, I expect us to trade below $6.20 and probably continue sideways from $5.80 to $6.20. If we go above the $6.20 next week, then we could, you know, at least go in a sideways pattern at the slightly higher level. You look at corn, it's in a sideways pattern between $3.75 and $4 for that March contract. I think it's going to continue. There's soybeans is sideways between $9.80 and $10.60, and I think that's going to continue. With the lower soybean stocks, it could go above it, but probably won't.
And then in terms of the market response, what is your take?
Well, I think the wheat's probably going to continue sideways. Remember, we're in a holiday period for really all of these commodities. It's going to depend on what the funds do. They came in on the wheat and sold some contracts this week, and I think that's why we went back below that $6.20. We're just going to waller around. The January WAS report, I think, is more important than the December. It can cause some movements, and so during December, I don't expect very much. However, if somebody's got to do something, then probably do it on the little rallies that we'll have.
And then in terms of advice for producers, is that, you know, along those lines still?
Yeah, I think so. If they've got wheat in the bin, I'd probably be moving some out on these rallies. If I'm looking at new crop 15, I'm probably not going to do anything, set and see what we do after the first of the year. If soybeans and corn, they've probably already moved it. If I'm buying feed, I don't think it matters if you're buying hand to mouth or you contracted. If you can't afford higher prices, I'd contract, but I don't think there's going to be much movement in any of the prices, at least for the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay, Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist. Thank you. Now a reminder from our Ag Policy team about an upcoming Farm Bill deadline. Monday, December 15th is the last day for owners and producers enrolled in the Supplemental Coverage Option, or SCO, to withdraw if they decide to enroll in the Ag Risk Coverage, or ARC program. In the new Farm Bill, producers can decide between ARC or PLC, which is the price loss program. Producers who choose ARC do not have the option of SCO. This applies to those who purchased winter wheat insurance on September 30th and decided to add the option for SCO. For those still undecided, March 31st is the deadline for choosing PLC or ARC, and according to our OSU Ag Policy Specialist, if you don't choose SCO this year, if you're enrolled in PLC, you can sign up for SCO in the years ahead.
Hi, welcome to Shop Stop. Today we want to talk a little bit about roller chain and maybe some alternative uses.
Okay, we all know that we can drive sprockets and use it for rotating objects on our combines or whatever it may be, planters, whatever, but there are some other uses as well.
Sometimes we might end up with, when we have a repair project or something with some small pieces of chain, and it's a really solid material, and it actually makes pretty good hinges.
Yeah, you can take these and weld these on whatever, a gate or the lid of your new smoker, and you can weld those on there, and that is a quick hinge you can use.
There's another use for some of that scrap roller chain that you might have laying around. We'll see you next week on Shop Stop.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime online at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and other social media. And if you like the pictures you've seen on this week's show, you can see more on Facebook. Just search for OSU Ag Photos. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next time at SUNUP.